quick question before we get into the meat of the issues and such. This Serving America movement.
Yep.
Okay, so is that at this point just a sort of a loose organization, or is it actually like a legitimate political party registered with the federal government or
No,
any states or anything like that?
It's an organization, a group of people who wants to change the political culture and the political dynamic, and feels that we need to move back to a dialogue, civil dialogue between people. They have a great website if you want to go on and talk about it, but it's not a party yet. Particularly in New York State, you don't become a party until you get 50,000 votes. But it's a group of very committed people who have said they want to engage in the process and change the political culture.
Yeah. So when people, I've experienced, not too often, but occasionally we've had some local races in which people have sought to establish an independent line on the ballot, and often they, for lack of a better word, concoct a name for whatever their party is, next to their name.
Sure.
Is that what you intend to have on the ballot? Will it say...
Well, we're working through that issue because, as you know, New York is a highly regulated environment. And so we have to make sure that we meet all of the requirements that New York sets forth in the election law. But what I intend to have is to run on a party line that supports the principles that I'm talking about and the principles that the Serve America movement is also believes in. And they're very similar and widely available. And it's saying we have to end this toxic political discourse. We have to have civil discourse with each other. We have to agree on facts. We have to be fiscally responsible. And we have to focus on solving problems, not campaign contributions.
All right, well, let's continue down along that line then. What would you say are sort of the main planks of your campaign?
Look, I think we have a system that is serving special interests and campaign contributors, and they're doing very well. And we see that the economy in Binghamton and upstate New York, but all of New York, is not going in the right direction. We've had 1 million people leave New York State in the past 8 years, more people than have left any other state. And, people in Binghamton and Broome County in the southern tier, they understand this. These are their friends and their families and their children who are leaving because there's no opportunity here. And that means that they can't have relationships with their grandchildren, that they only do it on FaceTime. And the kind of policies that Albany and the system has put forward are failing New Yorkers. And on top of that, we see just this rampant corruption. You can't pick up a newspaper or turn on a television news station without hearing about an investigation, an indictment, a corruption trial. Millions, if not billions of dollars are being spent on economic development programs that are rewarding campaign contributors, and New Yorkers are driving on over deficient bridges, over potholes, over sewage systems that are dumping sewage into rivers. The system is not working, and we need to upend it and change it.
So what policies would you put forward to stop this population loss and all these other problems?
Well, look, I'd tell you first and foremost, we would eliminate these economic development programs that don't work. And we'd take that money and we'd put it in infrastructure, like roads, bridges, sewer systems, and then modern infrastructure, like high-speed broadband, so people could have access to affordable high-speed broadband. That would help the entrepreneurial spirit, small business, and free markets. We'd look at what we would also do is say, we have to look at this onerous property tax burden that everybody in the state is dealing with, and understand that the reason our property taxes are the highest in the country is because how we fund Medicaid and how we make local governments fund Medicaid. The state needs to take over that responsibility. In exchange, we'd say to the localities, you can't raise your property taxes, you have to give people a real property tax rebate back. And also at the same time saying we have to get rid of the influence of money. I have stopped accepting anonymous political contributions in the form of LLCs since 2015 because I realized how corrosive it was to our underlying democratic process. And I won't accept them during this campaign either. And so we have to get rid of that. We have to do that. And then we have to have things like make it easier for people to vote. Vote by mail, no excuse absentee voting. We have to regenerate our economic system and our election system because too many people are being left out. And if we had more people participating, more voting, we'd have better public policies. Politicians would be more concerned about voters than campaign contributors. And of course, part and parcel of this is making sure that we have true nonpartisan redistricting as well.
You referenced the economic ills of upstate. Is there an upstate downstate divide in your opinion? Is there a disconnect amongst the politicians that come from downstate that have in any way contributed to this problem?
Look, I think the reality is when you start looking at our economy in New York State, what you're seeing is downstate, and particularly the New York metropolitan area, has had huge growth in the past 10, 20 years. And then the further out you get, the less growth that there has been until you come to the southern tier and upstate, where the New York Federal Reserve found in Western New York they actually lost jobs over the past 8 years. You cannot regulate Binghamton the same way that you regulate Brooklyn. There's got to be a difference there. And in order to do that, you have to have politicians who understand that and say that this is not a state that has one size fits all. When you try to say, have the same rules and regulations apply to a place like Manhattan, and then have it apply in Broome County or Onondaga County, it's not going to work because we don't have the kind of economic viability that can withstand that regulatory burden. So we need to understand that we have many different types of economic systems, and we have to regulate them and look at them differently.
Let's talk about your electability. Running sort of a third-party candidacy is certainly a tall hill to climb. Are you in it to win it? I know everyone always says they are, but what's your path then?
My path is to say to people, we need to change the system. It's serving special interests. It's serving campaign contributors. And I've always been an agent of change. I've tried to do that from the inside and have had modest success. I think we need to have complete and radical change. And the way to show people that I'm serious about that is by doing it from the outside and saying, look, I'm not going to run under the party banner of the Democrats because I think the Democratic Party establishment has turned a blind eye to corruption. The Republican Party sent messengers to reach out to me to say, we'd like you to think about coming with us. And I said, no, I don't want to be a part of the Republican Party as well, because they've turned a blind eye to corruption and they've thrived under it as well. We need to have a brand new approach that says, let's elevate people over partisanship. Let's talk about real solutions instead of theater that feeds only election cycles and that causes 1 million New Yorkers to leave to seek opportunity elsewhere.
From my understanding, hearing some other interviews with you, you don't necessarily agree with some of the progressive orthodoxy when it comes to things like a statewide $15 minimum wage, and I don't know where you stand on the whole single-payer universal health care. But I'm wondering, are you looking to appeal to the middle, to independents, to moderates? Where do you see your votes coming from?
Well, look, I am first and foremost a mayor. And as a mayor, I had to solve problems, but do it in a fiscally responsible way. Because you have to figure out how do you help people have a good quality of life at the same time that you're still able to pay police officers, pay firefighters, pave roads, have water mains that work. And as that way, I'm not an ideologue. I want to solve problems and I want to do it in a responsible way. So you can pick and choose various points of my track record and say, oh, well, that's a liberal position. I raised the minimum wage for city workers in the city of Syracuse to $15. But I did that after consultations and meetings and looking through our fiscal position as a city to make sure that we could afford to do it. I also said I would not engage in borrowing to pay off our pension benefits, because to borrow to pay an operating expense is fiscally irresponsible. So I'm about solving problems and doing it in a responsible way so people can pick and choose and say, oh, well, she's conservative on this, she's progressive on this. No, I want to move our community forward, move our state forward, and you do that by being able to be in the middle, talking to people and figuring out how together we can solve these deep-seated problems.
What would you say, though, to someone who says, as a Democrat, as a history of being a Democrat, you're more likely to pull votes from Cuomo, with Nixon already in the race on the Working Families Party line? Aren't you helping Molinaro with a path to victory?
What I would say is the people who ask that kind of question are people who are doing well in the system that we have. But the people who are paying the highest property taxes, seeing their children leave for opportunity elsewhere, worrying about whether they are going to be able to afford to stay in New York, what their services are like, they're looking for real change. Every day they pick up a newspaper or their phone and look at the news and say, this corruption is unacceptable. It's $8 billion have been spent on economic development programs in New York State. And I would say to you, think about how much we could fix water mains, sewer mains, roads, bridges, broadband, subways with that $8 billion.
How much are you running against the system of Albany, and how much are you running against Andrew Cuomo himself? You mentioned civil discourse. Do you have issues with the governor's leadership style, his temperament?
Look, I have had disagreements with Governor Cuomo's policies, and that's no secret, but they are not personal. They're about the policies. I was the mayor of the fifth largest city in Syracuse that struggled under the challenges of poverty, declining infrastructure, unacceptable education attainment rates. And every time I went to Albany looking for solutions, what I was given instead were talking points and one-hit wonders that were not sustainable or would last past an election cycle. That's just unacceptable. And you can't, for me, I couldn't be in my city and look and see how people were struggling and say to them, you know what, a nanotech solution is going to help us, or standing up in front of this factory and saying that there's going to be 1,000 jobs next year. It just wasn't true. It wasn't happening. So I think that for me, in my position, I had to make a decision about how is it that you can best be an advocate and say, look, the system isn't working. And New Yorkers know the system isn't working. Vested insiders, campaign contributors, they want people to believe that it's working. And I don't think that's going to work this year.
All right, let's transition now to your connections to the Binghamton area. Explain to me, you have a familial relationship.
Yeah, I spent a great deal of time in Binghamton as a child and as a young adult. My grandfather taught math at Binghamton Central High School. My father's a proud graduate of Shenango Valley High School. And I grew up in Cortland, New York, which is just about a half an hour north of here, and from a large family, and I'm the oldest. And because my brothers and sisters drove me nuts when I was younger, I spent a great deal of time with my grandparents on Shenango Street, and just had a wonderful time, and I think fondly of those times here. And it's part of why I'm running too, because I feel very fortunate that I was able to have relationships with my extended family, including my grandparents on both my maternal and paternal side. And there are too many New Yorkers who don't have that option anymore. And when I come to Binghamton to eat Speedies or to stop and talk with people, you look around and you realize that government should be serving these people better than it is. And I had a choice. I could be quiet about that, or I could stand up and be represented. And I think ultimately that's what my upstate roots and the people who were around me would want me to do.
Do you still have relatives in the area?
I do. I have an uncle who is here, but like the story that I talked about, I have most of my second cousins moved away, and so when we have minor family reunions, everybody is coming here from someplace else. And it's, we're grateful to have the family reunions, but it's also a reflection of what has happened to upstate New York, that so many people had to leave who didn't want to leave to go to other places to make a living.
From your time spent here in your youth and young adulthood, what do you think makes Binghamton special?
Look, it's a community, and it's people who know each other and like each other. And, of course, you could go on and on about the food. From Speedies to my grandfather's favorite restaurant was What's Your Beef? So we spent a lot of time there as learning manners and learning how to order. But it's a place where my grandfather was born, and he and his brothers left to go to World War II from here. And when they came back here, and I had family who built houses in Shenango Valley and all along Shenango Street, so I still know those houses that the family built. So for me, what's special about it is the memories that I have with my grandparents in particular, but with my extended family, and realizing that this is kind of where everything started from, and thinking about that family going to Binghamton High School. My grandfather was a career military officer and came back and taught math at Binghamton Central, and realizing that he went all around the world, and the place he wanted to come back to was Binghamton. And I'm grateful for it because, you know, then my father went to high school here and graduated, and we stayed in upstate New York, and I was able to, again, have a relationship with them and know them and spend time here.